Sosoliso was the first time that tragedy hit home for me in Nigeria. When they landed and crashed, so you just saw smoke.
You were in the air.
You were in the air. We're about to land after them. 60 students out of a campus of 600.
600.
So 10% of the student population.
That died in this air crash.
When Nigeria happens to you like that, you either hate the version of Nigeria that happened to you, so you are now determined to change it, or you abandon it.
He's built billion-dollar companies, sat across from presidents, and said the kind of truths that shake the internet.
But you have to understand how insane Flutterwave sounded in 2016. We were going to go up against InterSwitch. You started your pitch and 5 minutes in, have you heard of InterSwitch? And you say yes, and that's the end of the pitch. I think we pitched maybe 600 investors, and we had 150 investors on our cap table. It's a lot more difficult because I'm not going to come and tell you lies. I'm going to be like, yes, there's a big switch called InterSwitch, and we're going to beat them.
Behind those tweets and the tech headlines is a man who's had to navigate power, love, faith, and fatherhood.
For me, my ego is vested in making my wife more and more successful, not in lording it over her with power. The power is for me to use outside for her benefits, not inside the house. Inside the house, we know who has power. You're the foreign ambassador of your wife. She's the president.
On this episode of Afropolitan, we sit down with Iyin to talk legacy, controversy, and what it really takes to build your own table as a Black founder in a world that wasn't built for you.
If you cannot be globally competitive at doing something for the world, there's no development for you. You'll be a third world country for the rest of your life.
Can you speak to why we've specifically lost the manufacturing competitiveness?
So there are 3 reasons, right? The first one is...
Iyin, so most people know you for all the companies you have built, but a lot of people don't know your story, right? So what is your framework? Like, what made you who you are today?
That's an interesting question. I think the biggest thing that has made me who I am today is a deep conviction that if I hear from God that I have to do something, I can. So I think I'm usually willing to take risks that other people may consider insane. And also, by the grace of God, many of those risks end up panning out. Many, not all. And then I'm also able to see patterns and things that other people don't see, and and particularly that are contrarian to how most people think. So I think that has been kind of most of it. That's my framework. I mean, my framework is generally, 1, people are mostly wrong, right? Human beings are error machines. They make mistakes again and again and again. They rarely get things right. God is always right. Whatever God says will happen actually always happens. Not even almost, always happens, right? And the job of anybody is to figure out what God is doing and be a part of it if you want to make a significant difference in this world.
So speaking on your thinking, was there a point in your childhood where you realized I see the world differently than most?
I mean, I've always seen the world differently than most from day one, right? I mean, when my father used to, for a short period in between jobs, he used to write kabu kabu. That's what we used to call it at the time. And other kids were seeing, okay, we're in a kabu kabu with our dad and we're picking up passengers. I was seeing how my father was collecting cash and giving cash to policemen and petrol attendants. And, my mindset was, look, I don't want to be a taxi driver. It looks like a lot of work, but I'd like to be a policeman because they collect a lot of cash. Of course, that was not the whole story. And as I evolved in my thinking, it was, I thought differently about it. But at the end of the day, connecting dots is sort of my thing. And basically my entire my way of looking at the world is by connecting different dots that people don't tend to connect very often.
And I want to even go deeper because you have been in rooms that most Black people struggle to get into, right? I mean, I remember even when I not met you, but saw you in 2016, you were in rooms that everyone was fighting to get into. How have you been able to wield that power and understand the power of proximity so early on?
You know, I wasn't trying to get in those rooms, and I think maybe that's why I got into them. For, you know, many times I find that being your authentic self, going into a situation with a lot of confidence and demonstrating a lot of faith, and understanding that ultimately, like, you don't have as much control over your life as you think, and you're just a vessel for God to use, whether you like it or not, right? It gives me that balance, and so I'm not struggling. I've never been somebody to like try to get into a room. I've never been somebody to try and build a relationship with anybody, even if they're important, right? Or if other people consider them important. I generally wait for things to come to me, and then I decide, you know, what is for me and what is not for me. But I think what I do try to do that helps me a lot is I try to be helpful and I try to be truthful. And I think what I've learned in those circumstances and in those situations is that powerful people never get either of those, right? Like, powerful people have people who just want to tell them what they want to hear, and powerful people never get any personal help because everybody thinks they have everything they need and they only get asked for help. So I think those are the two things that actually get me into rooms and keep me in those rooms. People are like, oh, that kid is pretty helpful, and he'll be honest about what actually will work.
So you've been able to raise tens of millions in capital and also deploy millions in capital. What is the truth about what it takes to, first of all, raise capital as a founder and also eventually deploy it when you become a VC or an investor?
I mean, the biggest thing, look, people part with their money for all sorts of reasons. So everybody has to have their style for how they engage the world of capital. Some people do it by grift. Some people do it by suave. Some people do it by looking beautiful. I mean, if you have those advantages, you should use them. I don't. I'm very, very, very brutal. I'm not at all smooth. I'm not the prettiest man you've ever seen. So I can't use those to my advantages. What I have that other people struggle with is I have a track record that I hold on to very, very dearly. And I'm honest with myself and first, and then with others about what will work and what will not work. So the times I've been able to attract capital, and people actually don't realize, but I was talking to a friend about this yesterday. I actually have the hardest time raising money even after my successes because at the time I'm starting the businesses, every idea seems much crazier than the last. So let me just give you context, right? So, okay, Andela, I wasn't the one who raised capital, but Jeremy Johnson, who was my co-founder, told me everything that he knows about raising capital. And then I added my own spice, right? So that was the first one, right? So, okay, you know, that sounded crazy in the first place, right? Why are you going to go to the 419 capital of the world to go and build tech talent? Like, there's a lot of other places, right? So why does this make any sense? And he struggled to raise capital, and I watched him struggle to raise capital. He did eventually put up a big chunk of his own personal wealth. All of us brought our money. We had our old investors come in. So that was that, right? Now, I went off on my own to do Flutterwave. But you have to understand how insane Flutterwave sounded in 2016. We were going to go up against InterSwitch, right? So you started your pitch, and 5 minutes in, have you heard of InterSwitch? And you say yes, and that's the end of the pitch. Nobody actually wanted to hear what you wanted to say. I think we pitched close to, me and GB and Leke probably pitched maybe 600 investors, and we had 150 investors on our cap table. Some checks as small as 5K, 10K.
This was the first round.
Yeah. The first, this was after YC. The first ever round was $500,000, of which was a lot of 5K, 10K checks. The biggest check was from CRE. And that was only because they backed me at Andela and Pule insisted on it. So it's a lot more difficult because I'm not going to come and tell you lies. I'm going to be like, yes, there's a big switch called InterSwitch and we're going to beat them. And that was my style, right? I wasn't going to sugarcoat. I was always going to pick at the elephant in the room. I wasn't trying to hide any of the risks. I wasn't trying to hide any of the issues. And, it attracts a certain kind of capital. It's not a lot of it because a lot of people do like to lie to themselves, about what is possible and what is not. And many people don't value honesty because they may be trying to resell the dishonesty to other people. So it's just helpful if you maintain their reality distortion field. But that makes it very difficult to raise the way we do. So that's why I'm very reluctant to give people advice because I'm like, my advice will not work for you,
But what's the biggest misconception you've seen, especially with founders who may have built a product and are struggling to raise capital, or just people who are consistently frustrated throughout the process of raising capital from investors? I mean, there's a lot of stories around, for a lot of Black founders, maybe less than 1%, I think it's 0.000 something that are able to raise. What are some of the misconceptions that you see that a lot of those founders struggle with? And obviously there's still a big gap when it comes to funding, but still, what are some of the misconceptions?
I think the first thing you have to accept is there's some people who would never fund you. So just make your peace with it, right? There are people I don't pitch, right? So, never really raised money from a DFI, just development finance institution, just never did it. Don't really know how to do that. There are particular kinds of impact funds or foundations I can't raise money from, just because I don't know how to do it. There are particular kinds of investors I can't raise money from, and that's just it. So first of all, just kind of know the kind of investor you are a fit for, because you're not a fit for every investor. When I see Black founders start to say, like an all-white firm that is, quite frankly, doesn't care about the problems you care about, is telling you no, I'm like, what did you expect, sir? What were you expecting? Like, were you expecting that they were going to change their thesis or their worldview because of you? Capital is not a justice issue. It's an opportunity issue. So find your people, the people that relate with you. The second big misconception is the biggest unlock for an investor is actually being told what they don't know and what they can't know otherwise. Having been on both sides of the table, a lot of founders don't give enough thought to standing out. So if I gave you 100 fintech pitch decks from my inbox, I can repeat the words line by line. And I think my daughter can too at this point, right? Because they are all the same. It's a country of 200 million people, and there's financial inclusion is a problem.
Underbanked.
And they're underbanked. And like at this point, it's like a rote
Lambo.
And one pitch looks exactly like the other. By the time you've seen 5, invested in one that failed, you're like, I've seen that movie before. Let's switch sides, okay? So the biggest thing customers need to like, what exactly about this pitch makes me very different from others that have even tried the same idea before? Until you get there, until you get to that unique customer insight that drives your business won't work, and definitely your fundraising won't work, especially with good investors that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that founders get wrong is references. Good investors will always check. What do other people have to say about you? And not from a gossip perspective, but just people who have dealt with you and you have dealt with in your life. It's actually deeper than track record, because track record is, look, I've made money or I've done something. But I think people underestimate the extent to which you being able to have the kind of relationship where you give maybe a lot more than you get can really determine how much investors trust you. So there are investors that would invest purely on the basis of the fact that he had opportunity. He had a valid reason to screw me, and he didn't take it. So I owe you. Period. Right? He had a valid reason, and not like it's very gray area stuff, right? It's like, oh, we started a company together. The company didn't work. I mean, that kind of situation actually with a company, you know, started a company. We had a thesis was wrong. Didn't work. You know what I did? I took stock from another company, sold it, distributed the money to all the shareholders, at least made them whole. And the people who got the money, the first thing they're doing is calling me back and saying, that new thing you're doing, can we get, now I have to now be a bit discerning and be like, well, based on your risk, based on what I see, I don't think it's the right product for you. Let's talk about something else. But your ability to really be a good person in that respect really matters when you're raising money. At least when you're raising money my way. Now, if you're the kind of person who's just like, look, life is life, things happened, the money disappeared, whether there are good reasons for it or not, people are not going to put their neck on the line because you're unreliable. But if people see you as somebody who, regardless of the circumstance or the situation, they can rely on you, you will at least have that group of people who know you and can rely on you to bank on every time.
We met in 2016 in San Francisco. I think you were at maybe YC.
Yes, I was doing YC. I was doing Flutter Wave at YC. Summer 16.
I remember we went on a hike
Yes.
with Walter. And during that hike, that's when you definitely changed my life. I remember being on that walk, I think maybe like 2 hours, 3 hours, and how you and Walter were talking about solving issues, entrepreneurship, even issues like you were facing in startup world, just inspired me. I remember watching another interview that you did, and you said one of the unique things that you bring to any startup or any project that you're going into is execution risk.
Yeah.
Right, being willing to take it on. Can you explain what you mean by that?
So businesses are entirely built on faith. Entirely. Like when somebody starts a business, what they're doing is taking money that they earned from something or they raised from somebody who believes in them, right? And investing in a bunch of things, right, that they need to be able to satisfy the customer in the hope that the customer is happy enough to pay them. I mean, imagine if I walked in and I told you, you know what, HA, and this is the analogy I always use for my founders when I talk to them. I said, HA, there is a $1 billion check in that drawer. But you know what? The only place you can cash that check is in Chase, specifically the Chase in Houston. And this is the address. You can't cash that check anywhere else in the world, but it's $1 billion check. Figure it out. Bye-bye. Sounds like a scam. Yeah. But that is the leap of faith entrepreneurs take every day. So the hardest part of a business is getting somebody who's looking at that $1 billion check in their drawer every morning to actually take that leap of faith, to hustle ticket money, get visa, get on a plane, land first of all in DC, take connecting flight to Houston, not knowing where they're going to sleep. But they know that if I get to Houston and I can get this check in the bank, where to sleep will not be my problem. Yeah. But imagine doing that and it taking you 5 years. So my job is to help to push you over the cliff. So what does that mean? I mean, in the case of HA, I don't know what it was. I think was it a check or something?
It was, well, there was Afropolitan. You're the one who helped me, first of all, think from it just not being parties, because we were doing parties a lot back then. You were like, HA, there are like 800 people here. This is community building. If you scale this is what it would look like.
Yeah. So my job is first of all to help you think about it like, this thing can be, help you see the $1 billion check in your drawer, right? And see, okay, this is a bank now. This already is a draft. It's written to this bank. You can just go there. Okay, how will we get how will we get to Houston now? Now I say, okay, you need $2,000, Abi. I have 1K. Okay, take 1K. But I have a cousin. If we promise him, 500K of this 1 billion, maybe he'll be willing to give us another 1K. So you can see how it comes together, right? Yeah. So that's my job. My job is just to help you actually see that it's more than a dream and help you take that dream to reality. And the thing about the job is it's a whatever it takes job.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's just talking to the founder.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have money, you don't have a solution for them. You're just talking to them to keep them sane and keep them believing. Sometimes is you take your 4K, your last 4K, and you give it to the founder and say, guy, this is your plane tickets to Houston. Sometimes it's you call the airline and you say, do you have a free seat? It's okay, we can sit in the toilet. We don't mind. But that's the job, right? So my job is just to take that blank, that dream on a piece of paper and work with the entrepreneur to do whatever it takes to make that thing reality.
Yeah, but what had happened in your life? Because I remember when we were taking that walk, you were 25, I was 26 at the time. Mm-hmm. And there was some problem and you said, we can just buy a bank. And normally, to me hearing that, I'm like, is this cap? Is this but the way you said it, you were dead serious, like, we can just buy a bank. I remember at the time, because I was in law school at the time, I said, I've been living my life wrong. If my mates are saying, we can just buy a bank, what am I going to do with my life? And the reason why I'm asking that is, what had happened in your life prior to that point where there was a level of audacity that you had in approaching some of these problem sets, where you would say something like, hey, we can just buy a bank, and not just you saying it, but the other person talking to you was like, yeah, no, definitely, that's one way we could definitely use to solve this. What had you witnessed up to that point to encourage that level of audacity?
That's a fantastic question. I already get that question. I think it was a mix of things. I think, first of all, you have to understand where I'm coming from, right? My father's father, my grandfather, was a butcher by Leron in Babbage. He used to sell meat, right? And my mother's father was a bit more well-to-do. He was a missionary. He's one of the founders of ECWA. So, you could say, okay, but my father's father was, basically a nobody. It was just like, sell meat in Lagos Island. I mean, and I watched my father. Not that they told me or I was born into the wealth. Like, he worked his way from there to Now Merchant Bank, to Shell, to becoming the personal spiritual advisor to the late Olu of Warri. So my mindset from the day I was born was that God can do anything. So I don't have the typical limitations the average person has. Like, I just don't. If we need to buy a bank, we'll just pray. We'll hustle. Bank will show up. And that thing was somewhat prophetic, because shortly after, we got a microfinance bank. Now, we say you want to buy a bank. Nobody's looking at you crazy. It might not be a commercial bank, right? But you can get a bank, microfinance bank, 20 million naira, you have it now. There's no problem. Do you understand what I'm saying? So sometimes it's just about, God has a very funny way of working where it's just about expressing the desire and then thinking through it, because you won't think through it if you don't really believe it, right? Like, it's like, if you wake up this morning and you say, look, I want to eat owo soup and pounded yam, and you just said, but I don't have 5 naira in my pockets, right? You won't do anything now. You'll just be like, I don't have money. That's where it ends for you. So you're like, let me buy okpa and just be fine. Satisfy my hunger. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But because you have money and you know that owo soup is not a problem, you're not even thinking about who will cook it, how it will be cooked, where you will get the ingredients from. Are you thinking about any of that? You want to just that wherever the owo soup is, so long as somebody can cook it in this Nigeria. In fact, you're not even thinking about whether somebody can cook it in Nigeria. You're like, if we would fly somebody from the village to get the owo soup inside my house, it will do it. But I want owo soup. So the belief is the first step, right, to the kind of behavior that delivers results. So for me, I think now let's now come down to my life. So I was living in Bariga, right? So I followed my dad's, trajectory naturally, right? We're living in Bariga. We moved from Shomolu, Falagoro area, moved Bariga. Next thing they told us we're going to Warri, moved to Warri, all that. Now, I knew I wanted to go to school abroad. I didn't know where. And honestly speaking, our family couldn't afford it. But I was just like, look, I must go to school abroad, period. I don't know how it will happen, but I just believe. And an opportunity came. So it was the financial crisis. I imagine a lot of the kids that were supposed to come didn't come because their parents could no longer pay. So the school had to do a discount sale. So my brother was the one that was supposed to go because the idea was, my brother was studying sciences, so he should go and do this. So, because science education in Nigeria wasn't quite what it was. So, like, okay, Iyanu, my brother, go abroad. Then the school sends him and says, well, if you add another kid, we'll give you a 25% discount. My dad looked at it. I looked at him. We both knew that we couldn't afford that 25%. But, again, you watch your dad basically do magic. You're like, I trust you. You and God, you people will discuss and find a way. And true, they gave me my tickets and I went with my brother. I don't know how he did it. And now that I understand the finances, I still don't understand how he did it. You understand what I'm saying? But he figured it out. I went. But in the back of my head, I was like, look, I'm here on borrowed time. My goal is to go to Harvard. So let me get as much as I can do done to get to Harvard. Because that was my dream. I wanted to go to Harvard University. So I went. I did 10 courses in one semester and graduated. I think I was the fastest person to graduate. I got there in January. I graduated in August.
Wait, this is Waterloo,
from
right?
high school. From
high school.
From high, like, so the way Canada works, you're supposed to do like
A-levels.
2 years, like something like A-levels, yes, before you get into university. That program was supposed to take a full year. I came in January. I graduated in August. They rejected me from Waterloo. So at the end of the day, I moderated. My SAT scores weren't great, so I couldn't go to Harvard. And I went there also for a summer camp that somebody paid for. I looked at it, I thought, it's okay. But now at this time, my father had retired. Or was about to retire. So my mindset was I need to start making money for the family. So I went and I researched and I found out that Waterloo allows you to work and go to school. So my whole mind was, look, the man has tried. He put me on a plane. He got me here. My job now is to make money. So I'm just going to take this opportunity and make some money and work and make money. So once I finished my courses, I think I finished there are 2 semesters. There's a fall semester, there's a winter semester and a kind of a spring, summer type semester that's shorter. I did all my courses, required courses within that January to July. Finished everything. All of that. So actually, technically, I had that, January to April, right? Then the May to July semester or August semester, I technically had that to myself. I could do whatever I liked. So what I did was I did all my courses in that first thing before Easter. Then after Easter break, I went and worked because my mindset was I need to make money. So, but it was good I did all those courses because I was able to apply for schools in time for September. I was rejected from Waterloo. My guidance counselor was now the one that said, we'll go to Waterloo and find a way. So I'm very used to running up against walls and just throwing yourself at it. And you do it 2-3 times and the wall opens.
Jericho.
It just, I'm very used to that. It's like, in fact, sometimes when things are too easy, I'm like, what's going on? Where would the shoe drop? This thing is it's looking funny. It's looking very funny. People always joke, I don't like ease. I like
You like hard life.
I like hard life. I'm not a soft life guy.
Yeah, you like hard
So
life.
when something is too easy, I'm like, are you sure this thing will last? So so basically my own life experience has really been running up against walls. So I did that. Then when I got into university, I got an opportunity to go and work at the United Nations. I wanted to be a diplomat, right? So I thought that was what I wanted to do in my life. I went and worked at the United Nations. So want to buy a bank. It's just another thing on the checklist now. What's the
issue?
What's the issue? It's just we're going to buy a bank. Just let's sit down. Let's figure out how we're going to do it step by step. We'll do, So that's it.
Actually, I'm gonna ask a controversial question to follow up on this, right? Because I'm trying to think how I frame this well. Because you talk about audacity, right? And I personally believe that audacity mindset is instilled within a lot of Nigerians, right? And that is the reason why we are producing people who are building unicorn companies, raising capital, right? What do you think might be missing among Black people in the US, right? That same audacity mindset. Now, of course, there's systems, right? So I want to acknowledge that. There's definitely systems in place. I'm not going to say on a fair play, but what
spicy.
I'm getting spicy, but I'm getting spicy for a reason, because I do think that there is something there that is needed. So what do you think you have observed?
So what I think, it's very structural, and I don't know enough about it. But I live with an African American. I'm married to one who I love very much. So I'm learning. But what I've figured out is when you grow up in an environment under mental siege, you ask for permission a lot. Like unconsciously, for you, being polite is asking for permission. And that can limit you. Nigerians are considered rude because we're not asking you whether we're going to buy a bank. We're not going to find out whether it's allowed. It's not something that we're going to think about because we've just never had to do that. Yeah. Do you understand? And it's a recent phenomenon, by the way, just to be honest. I mean, you have Obasanjo to thank for that because he did the indigenization decree. Before then, if you're a Black man in this country, you couldn't own anything. All these big companies, they were seized.
Your dad talked about that.
They were seized by Obasanjo and handed to Nigerians because he had an incredible sense of self. I mean, that's one of the things that I'm an Obasanjo fan for life for, right? Because he literally he took the companies and gave us ownership. I mean, very systematic and practical. Like he said, look, you have to buy it, But basically he said, look, we're going to own these things. And that gave you what you have because you see a Black man owning a bank, you think it's possible. But imagine growing up in a society where, even to use the restroom in a public restaurant, you have to ask for permission. I think that was the first day it really clicked to me what it means to be under mental siege. Because I remember that day I was in Houston, what was it? Were we in Houston? We're in Austin or somewhere that was very weird. And, we're waiting for a bus and I was pressed. So I just burst into a restaurant and said, "Where's your bathroom?" Like a typical Nigerian. And my wife was looking at me like as if I committed a crime. I was like, what's good? I just ignored her because I was pressed. I just went into the bathroom, came out. And she started telling me, "Kai, you're so rude. You didn't even ask them whether you want to buy something." I said, "Why would I buy something? I didn't come to buy anything. I just came to use the bathroom. What do they mean by..." And if they tried to tell me, I think the aggression with me that I asked it, they just knew that this guy
needs to use the bathroom.
Don't try. I watched my wife also in a similar situation where she also needed to use the bathroom, but she went there. She was very polite. There was a wine store, like, "Oh, please, can I was like,
please,
what's the meaning of this? Please, who is pleasing you? Please, I beg." Where is the bathroom? My wife used to use the bathroom. Yeah. So you notice those are the small behavioral things. But I'm telling you, one of the things I started to do was I started to run a program like the Israelis have Aliyah. So it's like a birthright program. So what I'll do is I started with second generation Nigerians because they would at least be more amenable to the idea. But I think I've done 1 or 2 African Americans. And I just say, okay, come to Nigeria. Just come and experience Black power. And the truth is, by the time they leave with a spring in their step.
Yeah.
Because for them now, it's been normalized that, guy, you don't have to ask anybody for permission to do it. So we are incredibly privileged by virtue of very strong leadership from people like Obasanjo that passed the indigenization decree, a series of very young military generals that, even though they got a lot of things wrong, were proud,
audacious too,
and audacious about Nigerians controlling Nigeria. So that's why you have the spring in your step. Trust me, if you grew up in America and all you saw were white people running stuff, you wouldn't have the temerity to think about it.
Okay, that's good. Well, speaking on controversy, we're going to get to Twitter, right? And so you are known for saying it as it is, right? And sometimes saying things that are controversial, right? Why? Why do you feel like I can say what I want to say?
So in the Bible, it says, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
95% of young people's problems is because they are lying to themselves. They're telling themselves they can have soft life and success. And telling themselves they can achieve things while having a balanced work-life balance. They're telling themselves that, certain things are rights, meanwhile they're just privileges, right? They're telling themselves the source of their problems is government, right? Meanwhile, it quite frankly is because they just aren't productive. And what I just try to do is every now and then, not even intentionally, somebody gets me in a position where they ask me a question, and unfortunately, I drank truth serum. So I just say it as it is. Like, look, guys, you're not going to be able to do X. Can you accept that reality so we can start talking about what is right in front of you? Because let's go back to my analogy of the $1 billion check in the drawer. If you recognize that, yes, you have $1 billion check, but it's paper you can't use to buy anything, right? You're a lot more humble about what it takes to get that check to become money, than if you delude yourself that because you have $1 billion check, you're a billionaire. And that's what a lot of young people do. Right?
I want to go deeper, though. Is there been a time you said something that you knew may really ruffle some feathers or cross the line, but you had to say it? You felt like it was important.
It's always that way. I always know. Look, I think a lot, right? I don't just open my mouth. And people that know me well, actually, I'm a bit reticent if I'm not talking to people that I know well, right? If you get what I mean. I'm actually, in person, outwardly I seem very social, but I actually am an introvert when you get to know me very, very well. I can sit for hours and not talk to anybody. I'll just be on my iPad or computer. I'll just read. I'm actually fine with my own company. I can be a bit of a loner. So when I'm talking, I'm saying it because there's something that needs to be acknowledged and said that everybody is skirting around. For example, very recently, I talked about manufacturing in Nigeria and the reality that we have lost. We've lost. And everybody wants to pretend that, they have not lost. They can, you should have some pride. I'm like, this is not a matter of national pride. On the facts of the matter, you cannot compete. So where can you compete? So you can actually because if you're not, you cannot be a developed country if you're not globally competitive at something. It has never happened. It just hasn't. right? If you cannot be globally competitive at doing something for the world, there's no development for you. You'll be a third world country for the rest of your life.
Can you speak to why we've specifically lost the manufacturing competitiveness?
So there are three reasons, right?
Yeah.
The first one is power. So the moment you factor in power, you've lost, because we just don't have power.
Energy.
No energy, right? We don't have energy. The second reason is because manufacturing has now gone so far ahead from a robotics and all that perspective
Automation,
that the efficiency is impossible, right? Like even if you had human beings that were trained, and you don't, right? The level of efficiency of the factories that you have in China versus the ones you have here is just night and day, right? You can't catch up. It will take you it took them 40 years of investment to get where they are and we are where they are 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. Maybe even receded. So there's no skipping that 40-year journey, which if you started now, you're talking 40 years from now, and you're running a race where the guy in front of you is already 40 years ahead, and he's not sitting down and waiting for you, right? They already have dark factories where there's no human being making stuff 24/7, just robots. You haven't even started to figure out energy. How you gonna do it? And then the last thing is logistics. At the end of the day, your ability to quickly move things around, raw materials in, that's all, everything adds to your finished cost of goods. And we don't have it. We don't have logistics. We don't have the high-speed train system. We don't have waterways that work. We don't have roads. So where do you want to start from? And none of these things, you can't build them in 2 years. You don't even have the money. So it will take you some time to raise the money. It will take you some time to now start the building. You don't have the money, you don't have the buildings, you don't have the people. And so it's all well and good. I'm not saying, look, you can never catch up. Start the planning now, but that's not where you're going to be globally competitive, right? So where can you be globally competitive?
Yeah, answer that question. Where, because I feel like you were talking about it the other day. I saw a clip, but I have some thoughts, but I'm curious to hear, where do you think Nigeria can be globally competitive?
It's not going to be popular.
No, say it.
But no, I'm not. Are you going to tell me that? I'll tell you now. But the future I imagine Nigeria has, if it wants to be serious, and I think we will get there. I actually think this government is trying to do stuff, is 1 million young people showing up at a campus every day to sit down in front of a computer for 10 hours a day for $15 an hour. That's the future. Now, there'll be some outliers here and there. They'll do something. But the average job if we really want to, if we don't have this future, I don't think there's going to be in Nigeria, because that's where we can go, right? We can undercut the global price of knowledge work. Today, it's probably about $30 an hour. We can undercut it, $15 per hour, and basically be able to do quality work at scale.
Can you give some examples of what this would look like?
Coding, computer, monitoring, driverless cars or property, training AI with real life human reinforced learning. There are many jobs. There are many jobs where people just sit in front of a computer for 10 hours a day doing a repetitive task. That's what's going to happen.
So I wanted to follow up on that. Andela's business model was something similar, but not necessarily directly. But the idea was, if we're able to train talent here, we can export that talent globally. And you know how these things work. There's always a timing thing, right? AI has now come to the party, right? Yeah. So if maybe the thought process of the thesis was, hey, instead of paying this developer $300,000 in San Francisco, you might not be able to pay them maybe $50,000 in Lagos or $80,000 in Lagos. Now with AI, you can subscribe to ChatGPT for $20 a month. this thesis you're proposing, especially even in some of the businesses, you're going to literally be reinforcement learning for the AI and having people train the AI. Longer term though, and when we say longer term now, we are not talking about 10 years from now. It could really be 5 years from now. What does that look like when the AI has actually taken over and the cost is also dropping? It's no longer going to be $20 a month. It might even be open sourced and free.
Yeah, I think so. There's this concept Jeff Bezos has, which is figure out what will always be true and build your business on it. Businesses will always want lower wage. Always. It will never end. It's an unpopular thing to say, but it's what it is. And what AI does is it has a deflationary impact on productivity from a cost perspective, in the sense that it takes you less time to do something with AI, and it takes you, there's no point of competing with AI. But at the same time, there will always be some sort of handoff. There will always be somebody, a human in the loop. Now, that human in the loop can do more with AI than without it. When I say young people in front of a computer, they will basically be in front of a computer using AI. But at the end of the day, think about it, right? If you had somebody in Nigeria gathering all your data, putting it in AI, aligning your life, doing whatever, and the person could use AI even better than you could, so you didn't have to learn AI, wouldn't you prefer that to an experience where you had to do the learning yourself?
No, I agree, because one thing people forget is there's engineering prompting, right? And at the end of the day, the AI can only give you what you give it. So if you don't know what to give it, then the
and
AI
there's
can
even
only
just
give
pure
it.
problem solving, right?
Yeah.
Like if you, and the lower AI reduces those costs, the lower the cost. Like one person can manage 16 accounts of exactly the same kind of person, right? Or you're an influencer who, takes pictures and has to produce content every day. She has your life down pat, and she can be one person doing 16 of you all over the world from Nigeria with AI.
Didn't I say this? I said this to Eche the other day.
That's the future.
I don't think
there's a world where my beautiful sister here is going to want to figure it out. If she can pay $50 to not do so. Heck, she has other things she wants to do with her life.
You agree?
We'll proceed. We'll proceed.
But I think another question I have on this vein is the training, because the controversial clip I saw, and I said I'm gonna wait to talk to E myself, is around this lack of training, like this gap. Can you expand more on that?
So, like I said, we do a lot of training. We don't do a lot of skilling.
Yes, that's what you said specifically.
Yeah, and what is the difference, right? So, when you train somebody, you give them information, but you're not necessarily telling them what to do with it. Like, you're not being very prescriptive about what they can do with that thing, right? So, for example, I'm going to train you on customer service. So I'll put you in a class, give you a presentation. You understand what I'm saying? When you leave that class, it doesn't mean that you actually know how to answer a customer, or you know theoretically, but you've never done it before. So in that case, it's not a skill you have. It's just you've not added your own spice and pepper and rodo to the information you've been given. In Nigeria, we do a lot of that training, but we don't do skilling. From universities to, everywhere. So for example, if you have a cook, right? You take somebody goes to chef class, they get training. Doesn't mean the person can cook. To cook, you have to cook. There's no other way. You have to cook. So that's the issue that we have in Nigeria. And then you have to be able to, you can cook to this level. If you want to get to the next level of cooking, this is how it looks like. And these are the skills.
You need to
not the training, the skills you have to be able to cook at that level.
But actually, just, my last question on this specific thing is, so I'll give a perfect example. Countries like the Philippines, right? I would say India, but I think it's more shifted towards Philippines. They have lock down this virtual assistant market right now. It's very
Yeah.
common for all these big companies in the US to go to Philippines, get their talent, get their skill set. So do you feel like Nigeria has a chance in that game?
We do, because so this is the reason why I think we have a chance. 3 reasons. Number one, we're going to give birth to 5 million children every year. So doesn't matter what anybody says. Also 5 million children every year. If you can't find 1 million that can be useful, your problems are deep. Not everybody has to work, but just enough to make all of us a little bit more money, right? We'll be fine. So that's number one. Number two, the currency is now competitive and will become even more so. You see, what has happened in rivers is going to drive the currency further down, because the currency strength is linked to oil. And now that pipelines have been disrupted, the currency will go down. As it goes down, the labor becomes cheaper. As labor becomes cheaper, you understand what I'm saying? It becomes more and more competitive. You have to consider it. If you were running an outsourcing business 3 years ago, and you're running one now, your cost of labor is 5 times cheaper, through to no fault of yours. If you're running a business, a labor business 10 years ago, and you're running one now, your cost of labor is 5 times, from 300 to 500, 1,500, and you didn't have anything to do with it. So that's the second thing. The third thing is that the young people are ambitious and they speak English. So a few of them will find their way. It's not going to be everybody, but a few of them, if you give them the right infrastructure, will find their way. So when you combine those 3 things, Philippines cannot stand a chance. Because imagine you give them AI and you tell them, oh yeah, every customer is paying you X amount. The thing about Nigerians, you just have to align responsibility with reward. They will surprise you with their outputs. Just tell them you're responsible for this, and if you can get this to happen, this is how much you get. That's all the Nigerian needs to understand for him to deliver for you. We can definitely, within 3 years, take out Philippines, because it's a global market. And like I said, the one thing that is true is no corporation will look away if you're giving them cost advantage at scale. And the moment one starts to use cheaper labor somewhere, for the others to compete, they must come and do the same.
You've been able to advise governments, sit on panels, launch companies. What does power mean to you? Power and influence as it accrues, basically.
I mean, for me, power is the ability to impact people's lives, and positively, right? There are different points of view. I see some of my politician friends, they like the idea that power is controlling people's lives. I'm not excited about that kind of power, because it takes too much effort for me to be able to, I'm the kind of person, there's a Jay-Z line, he says, I'm not going to mention the you made Hove, make another Hove. Me, what I see power as is how many Hoves can I make? Right? So, okay, I made you, no problem. Can I make another one? No problem. God doesn't complain about human beings disobeying him, because it's like, I got 6 billion of you. And at any point in time, I can make more. So I don't need to worry. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. Yeah. So I see power as the ability to impact lives at scale. And that's what I build influence for.
To double down on that, you've been able to, since I've known you, that's how you've always approached things. You're always thinking about people maximizing their potential. I think my question is, how over the years have you learned to manage your energy? Because it does sometimes lead to burnout, right?
Yeah.
There could have been a time when you thought you could just do everything, like you had a magic wand, you touch this, it goes to unicorn. But we know that that's not how it really works. Like it doesn't work that way. So What did you learn through that process of learning to manage your energy? Because what does happen is everybody now comes to E to get what did Jesus say? Touch the hem of my garments, right? What did that process look like when you had to learn, like, hey, I actually have to manage my energy and conserve energy because burnout is real?
Yeah. No, I mean, for me, it's been a process, but it's a compulsory thing to learn. I think the first thing that I learned is, I first of all learned I cannot make people without their consent. Right? So early on in my career, I would be like, okay, I want to work with you. I'll make decisions for them. I'll tell them what to do. I'll pitch for them. I'll build for them. I'll do all the work and then hand it over to them. And then when you hand it over to them, they're like, yeah, I didn't ask you to do all of this. And that can be very heartbreaking, right? Because they're like, I didn't ask you to do all of this. It's great that you've made me a billionaire, but I didn't ask you. You chose to do it, and you're probably getting something out of it, which is always the worst part, right? Because in your mind, you're like, I'm doing all this for you because selflessly, I'm doing, it's so selfless. And they were right. You're getting your ego, your ego is getting massaged because you feel like, okay, I can make this person, but they didn't ask you. So the first thing I've learned is I only do as much as you are willing to. Right? I call it the come to me principle. Even Jesus said it. Jesus could have come to you and say, I stand at the door and knock. You must allow me inside. Even when you're saying, oh, you're going, come on to me. So people say, oh, you're proud. I say, no, I'm not proud.
He didn't say, allow me to come on to you.
No, he didn't say, allow me in. No, he said, come on to me. That means you must come.
And provide consent.
So when you come, then I know you are ready. Mm-hmm. If you're not ready, then you can there's no need to worry yourself and all that, because people misuse opportunities. People are opportunistic by nature. So if you create opportunities for them, they will take it, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's what they want. And it also doesn't mean that it's worth your time or what you want. So that's the first principle. The second principle is God controls everything. So I used to stress about outcomes, and I don't. It's like, look, this is what it is. I look at it, okay, this is what it is. No problem. Right? And then the third thing is freely give, freely receive. I don't ask for things back. If you come back and you say thank you, if you come back and you even insult me, if you come back and I just do, and I just like, okay, I'm just doing for God. Whatever you want to make of the opportunity is your business. Those three principles have kept me sane, because my engagement with people is not now overtly transactional, calculating. If they don't come, I don't do.
No do.
Yeah? It's very simple. So if I tried and it didn't work, it's God. Don't be me. Now God. If I tried and it worked, now God. Don't be me too. And then if you like, collect from me and insult me. It doesn't concern me. Collect from me and thank me. It doesn't concern me. I'm just there. Anyhow. So those three things have just lowered my blood pressure, because then I don't bother myself. I'm not scheming. I'm not thinking, what if this guy cheats me? So it saved me a lot of trouble and made my life so much simpler.
Actually, I want to refer back to something you said earlier about powerful people, right? And quite often people don't give them something. They don't help them, right? Yeah. What do you think? Have you seen like a pattern in things that powerful people want?
Oh, yeah. I've seen a lot. The biggest thing they want is information. People don't give them information. A powerful person's reality is entirely constructed. I've sat with the president maybe twice, right? Very briefly. what you don't realize about the president, he doesn't actually know what's going on. Honestly, I mean, how would he know? He's in a motorcade. He's driving so fast, they can't see anything. Right? His phone is not with him. There's an aide. If he doesn't want you to talk to the president, you can't talk to the president. Everybody who comes to him is scheduled. You can't meet him on the streets. The guy actually does not know anything that's happening in the country. And he has security briefings, meaning he doesn't read newspapers. So all he knows is whatever they give him in that security briefing. 100 million people could have died yesterday. If they don't want him to know, he will not know. I can tell you for free. He will not know. The principal secretary of the president, if he doesn't want him to know something, he will not know what happened. That is how powerful people's lives are. Is why if you notice the way I live, I actively fight those types of restraints. I don't want guards. I don't want anybody to construct reality for me. I want to see myself, what is going on. So if you're around a powerful person and you're somebody they can trust to give them real information, there's no level of access they will not give you. It'll be like that guy, I know when I call him, he will tell me what's going on, whether I want to hear it or not. My people will not do that for me. So people think that powerful people care a lot about ego. Some do. But sometimes what they really need, what they misinterpret the ego thing for is an ear. They just want to complain. I have a few friends that are very powerful. They call me at 12 midnight. I just rant for an hour. Because they know that I will not say anything to anybody.
It's therapy.
It's just their therapy. And they can't talk to anybody about it because taxes are about to go up. Therapists cannot do. Do you understand? So they don't have anybody to rant to. Do you understand? Then everybody that comes to them comes with a proposal. When you're a minister or you're a governor or you're a powerful person, everybody comes to you with their handouts. Everybody. So you don't even have time to judge the value of the service, whether it works, whether it doesn't work, whether it's what you really need, because everybody is coming to you with an agenda. You understand? They've come ready to collect. It's a very terrible life, I'm telling you. It's a horrible life. So people don't actually know how deprived powerful people are. So it's actually very easy to be useful to them. It just requires some courage because if most people are short-term, so their mindset is, look, this guy is here. This is my opportunity. Let me get what I can get out of him. And that's that. But when you actually sit down and build deep relationships with very powerful people, they have so many needs that are not, they never get fulfilled, right? Because they can't pay. What are you going to pay to listen to you for 1 hour and not repeat your gist? There's nobody you can pay for that now. What are you going to pay to give you solutions to problems that they won't chook in a consultant and like, you can't pay anybody.
Put in their own 50%.
Put in their own margin. You can't pay anybody. Why are you going to pay to just tell you the truth? Right? When everybody else is just trying to, keep bad news away from you.
Interesting. Well, speaking of power, I want to switch into your marriage, right? Your wife, I believe I've had the privilege of connecting with her, chatting with her, just learning so much about her, and she's powerful in her own right. So I'm curious, how do you balance ego, love, and leadership?
So, I mean, for me, and again, we're still working through all these things, but for me, I'm very biblical in the way I look at things, and my own model for how my relationship with my wife works is entirely based on the Bible, right? And it's something I take responsibility for. It's not something I say, oh, you must behave like this. And when you really look at the Bible, right? When the Bible says the husband is the head of the wife, and I know all the feminists are shouting now because I'm about to say something controversial.
Spicy.
What people think is that the husband is supposed to tell the wife what to do. But what it actually means is that the husband is supposed to be the cover for the wife. meaning that, in fact, it says it in the Bible that if the wife prays for something and the husband doesn't approve, it cannot happen. It's in the Bible. Like, it's there. So the way I work with my wife is I take responsibility for her own goals and she supports me. So my wife says, okay, I want to build this. Okay, no problem. Even if I'm broke, the first money that will come out of my account, madam, go and do what you need to do. It didn't work. Okay, it's fine. Why didn't it work? Okay, who do I need to call? Okay, how do I? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, all my friends are actually my wife's friends now, because my job is just to say, here are good people you should know. But I don't try and control the relationship. Yeah, that's her. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I feel like for me, my ego is vested in making my wife more and more successful, not in lording it over her with power. The power is for me to use outside for her benefits, not inside the house. Inside the house, we know who has power. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah? No, inside the house, my wife does not approve. There's nothing happening. We know. Inside the house. Outside the house.
You're learning it now, though.
You're learning it. No, a man doesn't become a husband until he has learned that. Until then, you're just
You're learning.
Yeah, you're learning. You're a bachelor in training. When you learn that the person that has power is your wife, then yeah. But that's it. You're a cover for your wife. You're the foreign ambassador of your wife. That's your job. She's the president. She's the president. Your job is now to advise her, to say, come on, madam. The way you want to approach this guy.
There's a ditch there.
Wahala go deal. Your Excellency, let's manage our approach small. Don't worry, I'll also tackle him, but let's not go like that. Let's go like this. I hope that's permissible. But outside, you stand in front now and pretend as if you're the one making the decision. You know what I mean? But that's literally how we work.
I love that. So speak to, how do you manage being a husband and a public figure? Like, how do you balance that?
I mean, so we try our best to keep the world outside of our marriage. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I try to make sure she has her own public persona, and I try to make sure I have my own public persona. And we do things together, but you're a person in your own right. You're a person in your own right. I mean, I don't know if it's good or bad. I don't have any examples or anything to the contrary, but I try my best to make sure people don't extend their expectations of me to my wife or vice versa. It's like my wife will go out with you. I don't go out, and everybody knows. Do you understand? Like, don't expect me to go out with you to club. I won't do it. It's not because I think there's anything wrong with it, but it's just not how I roll, right? And me too. I won't expect my wife to sit down at home on a Friday night. That's not my expectation of my wife. My wife is out there. And then at home, we can be people and we can tell each other, okay, this thing you did, I don't think so, or whatever happened during the day. Like, you have to understand your marriage is first for companionship, right? Before it's about what other people want. If you both don't get what you want out of your marriage, it doesn't matter what other people want, because there won't be a marriage. You're acting.
Can you speak on it? Because this thing you just said is the number one thing I tell people, is that in your marriage, there has to be a friendship. There has to be a companionship. If it's none, it doesn't matter. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, even from the time I got married. So, I mean, when I got married, I was successful fairly early, right? So by 27, I'd already done Andela, I'd started Flutterwave. And I'm sure the expectation, when I was thinking about marriage, I think for me, the first thing was, look, I need to marry somebody I can be authentic with. And for me to be authentic with that person must be impervious to external influence. Do you understand what I'm saying? So It cannot be somebody that the mother would tell her, that your husband, the car he's using is not good, oh. How can't you get him to change it? Then she'll now come and nag me for 3 weeks about buying a Range Rover. I was like, that's what I don't want. Because I saw my friends literally going into marriages like that, where it was largely about, okay, marrying into a status, marrying into a class. You understand? Doing certain things out of compulsion. I was like, I would not marry. And most of the Nigerian girls I'm dated, sorry to say, they're too susceptible to external influence. From their mother, from their friends, from their family. You understand what I'm saying? Like, they weren't individuals in and of themselves. They didn't have their own mindset about things or whatever. I mean, how I knew my wife was that her best friend didn't like Nigerian men. So I was like, okay, if her best friend doesn't like Nigerian men and she's still hanging out with me, then this is the one. Her boyfriend had a bad experience with Nigeria. I think her mother had a bad experience. I was like, okay. So she would come and say, I'm suspicious of you. I'm like, yes, be suspicious, they go. It's okay. I saw you are married now. So don't worry. So, I mean, you have to just marry. So for me, it's always been about, how do you marry somebody who both of you have a relationship? Not you're marrying her friends, not you're marrying her family, not you're marrying her worldview, not you're marrying her, you understand what I'm saying? But you're like, me and my wife have a relationship first. Then both of us will now go to the others and say, okay, we have to deal with this person like this, we have to deal with this person like that. If that's not the basis, marriage will not last. Because you do not, I mean, the worldview of the person you're marrying is important, but it cannot be the most important thing. You still have to deal with them as a person.
Yeah. And also, I want you to speak about fatherhood. Have you, raising your daughter, have you learned anything that you even brought into your business or how it's changed your worldview?
Well, yeah, I'm learning a lot. I had a very interesting experience with fatherhood because when we gave birth to my daughter, Ichi used to come and help me change diapers.
Yeah,
so he got practice. He got plenty of practice. But he's up there, don't worry. I owe him some diaper credits.
You can repay back.
I have to pay back, so don't worry. I'm waiting, So because what happened was my wife had a C-section, and she also was having some issues with postpartum. So she wanted to go straight to work in order to kind of be doing something. So what that meant was that, and I was the jobless, unemployed popsy. So I had to stay at home with my daughter. And that gave me a very strong bond with my daughter, which was incredible. And then, so that was when, I would bring her into business meetings. I'll bring her. And I realized over the years that a lot of what she heard unconsciously during that time does shape a lot of her thinking about what I do and about how she approaches problems now that she's a lot older. It's actually funny to watch how much your kids absorb unconsciously from what you do.
Give an example.
Okay, so my daughter, every year since she turned 3, she does a business. Yeah, she does a business. Her business last year, she bought toys and then she repackaged and resold the toys for Christmas. She actually made good money. She actually made good money from it. When I knew that this one has been listening too much to my conversations, so she's running. She's in a school here, and they had like a student body election. So they said, pick the offices you want to run on. Now, my daughter is in KG2, right?
And what is that for American?
KG2, that would be like it's not first grade yet. It's like elementary, kindergarten.
Kindergarten. Okay.
Yeah, kindergarten. She's like, I want to be president. And so all of us were like, Madam, you're in KG2. There are primary 4, primary 5 kids. You understand what I'm saying? Class 3, class 4, class 5 kids. in the school. Madam, calm down now. Get tea. So it had to be a whole project to like beg her that she cannot be president in KG2. And that she has to sit down and learn so that she can. But trust me, this babe brought her notebook on the right. So I take her to school most mornings and we talk. On the ride to school, she started writing her manifesto. And the thing in her manifesto, more sleep cuts.
Siesta cuts?
Cuts, yeah. She wants the kids to have cuts. So that was when I started to understand that, this girl has actually drank a lot more of the Kool-Aid of like business than, because at some point she was now saying that, that if this, I now said, how would the school pay for it? I was just trying to, she said they can charge. So, and you can tell like she's very invested in like business stuff. So what I've started to do is I actually let her, she sits in on most of my meetings. If I have them at home, I let her sit down. Listen. Listen to what everybody is saying. Of course, she can't contribute, but I let her listen. Then after I ask her, okay, what did you think? What did you hear? Most of the time, it's not. Once in a while, she comes up with like brilliant, like flashes of brilliance. Like one time, she was listening to a meeting that we're having about a content strategy. Wanted to sell some content, and she actually was like, "Well, you should sell the content in bulk because that way you would make more money faster. So you can now sell the content in retail," which I thought was actually pretty smart for a 5-year-old.
They say all 5-year-olds are geniuses. And then it's after 6, it's like because the worldview starts pushing things on them, so it shifts their brain.
Well, that worries me too. I'm actually reconsidering school for my daughter. I'm actually thinking about it.
Explain more. Why?
Well, my preference is that she just starts learning the business now.
I agree.
No, I agree.
Because those 10 years of school I did.
That I'm just like, why should I wait? Like let her just let's figure out a way where she can do maybe 2 or 3 hours of school a day and she can start learning the business.
Because by 18.
Yeah.
I
would agree. I would do homeschool. Like it's something, we've never really talked about this.
AI homeschool.
We never talked about this, but I personally have been very interested in like homeschool, like because they have curriculum, so they learn basic things. They do need to know like basic math, things that they can live in life.
The thing is, the application of those things they learn in real life is what really reinforces the learning, right?
Yeah.
Like my daughter is pretty good at math, primarily because she has to count her money.
Yeah.
And she remembers when you owe her.
Solid traits.
She remembers when you owe her. You can't actually get past. She'll tell you to the cent. You owe me, Dada. You owe me 800. Where's my money? Yeah. So I'm actually considering it, but I'm thinking of my wife. Obviously has her issue, her hang-ups about it. But I think it will be fun.
I wanted to ask a question, and it might be a slight transition.
Yeah.
In December 2005, there was a flight crash, Sosoliso, with students coming from Loyola. Mm-hmm. You attended Loyola. First, I wanted to ask, how did that experience shape you? And then follow it up with a question around legacy, right? What has building legacy cost you in building that? But first, let's touch on the Loyola.
So I think for me, that was the first time I understood that Nigeria... So I imagined I was in a bubble within Nigeria before that time. Not because we didn't experience Nigeria's challenges or hardships, but you know how you hear bad news in the newspaper or whatever, and you're just like, you know what, I'm so sorry for them. And it's like, that's not me. Sosoliso was the first time that tragedy hit home for me in Nigeria, because it was friends, it was girlfriends, it was people who sat next to you, it was friends, it was people you knew well, and every day you walked out of your classroom. I think they did this weird thing, which I don't know if it wasn't psychological torture, but they actually left their desk and their chairs for a term.
Wow.
So you would literally like see people, they'll just be walking to a chair, walk past the chair and just start bawling, right? Because it's just like there was somebody there and you knew there was somebody there.
There were about 60 students, for people who don't know. There were about 60 students
out of a campus of 600. 600. So it was 10% of the student population.
That died in this air crash. Yeah.
So
were you supposed to be on the plane or not?
Yeah, I was supposed to be. So that was the other thing. The other side of it was, that was the day I knew I could die. That was the day my mortality became like
vivid.
This is real. Because what had happened was I was supposed to stay back for Kairos. I changed my mind at the last minute. So I'd missed the Shell plane. So because my dad worked for Shell, even though it was a somewhat junior, there was a plane that takes you home. So you could get on the plane. So, I basically then booked a flight because, I just said, okay, look, I'll book a flight so I can go home. So I'm not like staying on campus for Kairos. What then happened was the buses left around 5 o'clock, which they usually do. So I missed the bus because I slept in. So obviously the next best thing was to get on the Shell bus, which if you call them early enough and you told them and explained to them, maybe if one or two of the kids decided to stay for Kairos or ultimately decided on another arrangement home, maybe they decided to go on the flight or whatever, you could get on the Shell plane. Because the thing about the Shell plane, it wasn't like a firm arrangement. It could come, it could not come. It was not like a flight. It was like if they were going to fly in and they were going to fly back empty, then they would just take you and go. So that was literally how I got on the plane. It was like I missed the bus and I had to get on the plane, on the Shell plane. So we were going to Port Harcourt. When they landed and crashed, we saw and we had to turn. So you just saw smoke.
You were in the air.
You were in the air. We're about to land after them.
Hey.
So they now diverted us to Warri. No, Lagos. We went back to Lagos. Then I think a few hours later, they diverted us to Warri.
Did you know what happened when you saw the smoke?
So people were talking in harsh tones because I think they had told the pilot that he can't land because it was carnage on the runway. So it was very, very like, this was like this could have been you. There was no question about it. There was no, this was literally your life right in front of your eye. I think when I got home, my mom had already, I think they were doing prayer of Thanksgiving. So the way they work, the way like the pastors work, right? They don't mourn too long. And it's not like a bad thing. It's actually like in the Bible, you can't mourn like those who have no faith. So they just be like, if you die, just be like, okay, well, God has taken you. Everything else is just ceremony. And if you're young, they want to bury you as quickly as possible and move on. I think when I got home, my parents had already been like, must have taken that Sosoliso flight. So they had already started to come to terms with like, and then I just walked in. Everybody just looked at me. But I wasn't even in the mood because my mindset was, are you telling me that I'm not going to see all these people when we get back to school? Or even some of them were coming to Warri. Some of us were supposed to meet in Port Harcourt because they're not that far from each other. So, I just went to my room and just locked the door. I didn't even answer anybody.
A lot of those students, because I also know people who attended Loyola around that time too. A lot of that school had so many talented students, right?
Incredible.
What would you say from a psychological point of view? How were you able to process the trauma from it? Obviously back then there might not have been that many tools that helped young people process, but how did they help you guys get through that process?
They did their best. I think you had a lot of reflection sessions. You had a lot of, I know we used to do something where you talk about the people and all that. I'll be honest, what helped me the most was really understanding. So we created something called the Consent Students Initiative. And then we started to build a political movement around, safer air crashes. We wrote letters to get better safety regulation. I think that was the last major plane crash that happened afterwards. All sorts of stuff, right? So getting people prosecuted, improving the air investigations, all that stuff. So I think getting involved in that really, really helped me, because it was just like, okay, you felt like you could do something. And then, in fact, for me, that actually started a lot of my interest in politics, because up until that time, I didn't really think of politics as something that mattered as much. I thought it was something that the country had to deal with, but not something we had to deal with. But when Nigeria happens to you like that, that's why I always say, Nigeria has happened to me in a way that when Nigeria happens to you like that, you either, I don't know if the word is love, but you hate the version of Nigeria that happened to you, so you are now determined to change it. So I think that's what happened to me. Or you abandon it. I mean, it's one of the two. And for me, that was the point I realized, like, look, it would be unfair to abandon Nigeria, because and anytime I think about it, that is what always brings me back. Because I'm like, look, those 60 kids died. You could have been one of them. If you got to live past that time, you have a duty to actually make their lives count here, where they died. That's the least you can do, right? So so that's how I look at my own engagement with the country. It's not, I mean, I could have left a long time ago, but I look at it as people died because the country didn't work. If you got to live, you have a responsibility to make they haven't died mean something.
And what does legacy look like for Iyin?
I mean, for me, legacy is being able to hear stories like H's, like, hey, E, I went on a walk. I mean, there's very little that lights me up like that. E, I went on a walk. And it's not like you were intending, you didn't ask me for mentorship or anything.
Because initially you said it was mountain climbing.
I'm sorry.
And we got
I
there.
always apologize for it.
Because mountain climbing versus hiking is two completely
Chika,
different things.
This was the truth.
We were fighting for our lives.
Eche at that time ate very well.
He's not the
The beard wasn't connected like that. No, he said we're going mountain climbing.
Wait.
So I was like, well, kill two birds with one stone. Get my brother a bit fit. Right? And then let him meet Walter.
Yeah.
So we went on a small hike. And I knew that if I said more than that, he wouldn't come. So I just told him, come and see your city now. Come on a small hike. So that was how I got him. Yeah. That's how I got him on the trail. But I mean, for me, it's about those moments, right? Where somebody says, look, E, I always think about, like, the analogy I started with, the $1 billion check in the drawer. If I can do something to help you cash that check, whether or not I get any part of it, I'm just happy.
I love that. So we have to do rapid fire questions. First one I have is, what food is like your comfort food?
That's a very interesting question. It has to be pounded yam and vegetable, because that's like, if all else fails, I can eat that one anywhere.
What's your favorite emoji?
The prayer emoji.
Because that's what this country makes you do every day.
It's for my wife. Thanks.
Okay.
It means prayer. It means I beg. There's no inappropriate.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Where you don't travel a lot. Why?
So it's the come to me principle. I actually don't like traveling because I spent a lot of time traveling. And to be honest, beyond my love for Lagos and the Aba in particular and showing people around, I also often feel disrespected when I travel because of my passport. So my own emotional response to the disrespect is just to stay in my country. You understand? Because when they're asking all this question, I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, what? I just came here for a meeting. What's all this questioning? You're questioning me. I don't like it, so I don't travel. I hate going for visa interviews. I don't like going for visas. If I can help it, I don't like it. So that's why I don't travel as much.
If someone Googled your name, what is the one thing you would not want them to see? Like something that would show up?
I can't actually think of anything. I think because I try to be very transparent. That said, I think that there are definitely a lot of articles that put a lot of things out of context. You know, there's one very famous one from 3 years ago. It's not that I don't want you to see it, but I do want anybody who's reading it to look at it with critical eyes.
What article was it?
The butterfly, what was it? Flutter wave, quicksand, something by David O'Day. I actually want people to read it, but I would just want them to think, you know, does this story actually add up? Or are there things that, you know, but beyond that, I mean, there's nothing I wouldn't want. Nothing. I'm an open book.
I remember at the time, you know, there's F1 visas, O1 visas, Nigerian immigrants trying to figure out their immigration status. And I remember at the time saying, this one that you're saying buying bank, what type of visa do you have? And you're like, O1 visa. And I remember being blown because up until then, a lot of Nigerians who go feel like they're limited in whether they're able to get work, whether they're able to start companies, or just, you know, fully thrive until they get their immigration status done. The lesson I took from that was when you're the best at what you do, they'll change the rules for you.
Always.
Number one. But always. The importance of leverage too, right? Which was you've provided so much value to the society, or you're promising to provide so much value for the society that they will reward you for the work that you're doing. Can you speak a lot more to that? Because I feel like these days in my day-to-day life, I always say if I don't get something or if there's a roadblock, I always say if you're the best at what you do though, this roadblock can reduce.
So I always say, look, whenever I make an ask, the question I ask myself is, do I deserve what I'm asking for?
Yeah.
And you know, actually it's funny. I got my O1 on the back of Andela.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even like, even though I was in YC, it wasn't like, it was just on the back of this guy built a company, Mark Zuckerberg funded. So on the back of that, clearly. Clearly it was. Yeah. So and that's the question I think a lot of young people don't ask enough. Do I deserve what I'm asking for?
Yeah.
Right? I want a $7,000 salary and the ability to go and lounge in Santorini every other quarter. Do I deserve it? Like true. If I was on the other side of the table, should life give me this? Right? I want a US visa, you know? Okay, what have you done that should qualify you for a US visa? Because if you've true done the work, they will give it to you. But that I think is the question that counterbalances the audacity.
Yeah.
Because the thing about the audacity is that you must complement that with the ability.
I love that.
You understand? If you have audacity without ability, you're just a proud nonsense. Empty, hot air, you know? If you have ability, like a lot of my African-American brethren, very talented people, right? But no audacity, everybody would trample on you. Like for my wife, I mean, I would say this publicly. My wife can probably best anybody in Hollywood in terms of her rap sheets. But she doesn't always act like it, which is good sometimes. But I know that if there was a Nigerian that had the number of nominations she has had, we no go hear awards for this country.
Yeah, we're too proud.
Do you understand? So sometimes people have audacity but no ability, you know. But you have to combine the two.
Yeah,
you have to know that. Look, I deserve what I'm asking for. It's both your security, right? But it's also your check, right? It's your confidence and your check. Your confidence is that, I've done the work. That's why if somebody comes to me and starts telling me, what you're building cannot succeed. But I'm like, guy, I did 1, I did 2, I did 3. All of you said the same thing the last 3 times. It still work. Why should I believe you now? Right? That's the confidence, right? But the check is, this one go hard small. So let me go and do extra work to make sure that all these concerns that are being raised are resolved. So that's how I look at life.
Okay. And the last question we ask every guest is, who do you want to see on the Afropolitan podcast? Whose story do you think needs to be told?
Fola Adeola. That guy is the baddest as investor, public servant, entrepreneur. Like if you were looking for a Benjamin Franklin of Nigeria, that would be Fola Adeola.
No, I feel like we could talk for hours, but honestly, thank you
I'm
so much for giving us the time.
I'm grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.